Hello again. Two prominent psychologists, Charles Linden and Oliver James, speak about cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, and they say basically that sometimes it's not great and it doesn't work. That's the long and short of it. Charles Linden has a method called the Linden method, which helps to combat anxiety, and I've read that book of his and the DVDs that he does, and it's great. It's a wonderful way to do it. And similarly, Oliver James has mentioned in recent newspaper articles that CBT can sometimes be just a piecemeal sticking plaster therapy. CBT in itself has got good results research-wise because CBT practitioners are forever filling in forms, so it's very easy to research in comparison, say, to person-centred counselling, which is much more difficult to delineate with forms and to make statistics off. So CBT in itself is quite easy to get to garner statistics from and to look at data. But people aren't about data, people aren't about statistics. If you look at the latest CBT journals, what you'll find is that it's all about statistics, and what they do is take very tiny control trials, and they then garner some statistics and results based off tiny numbers. So they'll take like 12 people and do a little sample, and then they'll draw conclusions from that. But the trouble is, the brain isn't as simple as putting CBT categories and techniques just onto it, just because it fits a certain set of protocols that can be learned by rote by any eye-apt practitioner. So it's not as simple as that, because therapy involves a connection and it involves rapport with people. So in my opinion, it can't be learnt by rote. Therapy is an interpersonal dialogue between two people that has to be done in the here and in the now. And it's not about giving someone a form to fill in and saying, how depressed were you the other day and how depressed are you out of 10? So I do believe there's a role for CBT, but I don't think it's the silver bullet that a lot of people talk about. It's certainly easy to get statistics from. There's always been anti-movements in every form of psychology, because psychology itself is an inexact science. The same with psychiatry. Psychology and psychiatry are basically conjecture and speculation. So a lot of the time you are fishing around trying to find answers, trying to help people with their lives, but it's not an exact science in the same way as taking someone's appendix out or fixing someone's broken leg is. So they go in with a broken leg to A&E, they get an x-ray, they say, oh well, your leg's broken in 2 places, they'll put it in a plaster cast, fix it, and you're okay. It would be great if psychology was like that in a sense, but it's not. So it's very difficult to say to someone, well, you feel like that because you've had a terrible early life or because you were abused as a child, because a lot of people don't like to buy that. They think they've sorted their problems out. So it's very hard for CBT or any therapy to get to the root of that. And there are always, I often think that the greater the abuse as a child, or the greater the neglect, because that's a kind of abuse, then the more you're going to suffer as an adult. So there seems to be a direct correlation there. So the worse your childhood, the worse your subsequent suffering. That makes sense, doesn't it? And so it's very hard to put numbers on that and say, well, how much did you suffer as a child out of 90%, or things like that. There are certainly anti-movements, like I say, in everything. In the 60s, there was a very famous psychiatrist called R.D. Laing, who used to write, he was part of what was called the anti-psychiatry movement, who said, just let psychosis out, just let people be as they are and become who they want to be. Even if they're psychotic, let it go. That was R.D. Laing's contribution to psychiatry. And sometimes these people, it did work with some people as well. They weren't medicated out of their eyeballs with what used to be Milltown in the 50s or Valium in the 70s. They didn't give all that out, and R.D. Laing tried to engage with severely damaged and sometimes psychotic people, and sometimes it worked as well. And Thomas Szasz carried on that ideology as well in the 70s, writing about the anti-psychiatry movement and the fact that a lot of mental institutions existed just because no one knew what to do with these poor people who were suffering. They didn't have anywhere to put them, so they put them in a home because they didn't know what else to do. In the same way, some would argue that they give medication out now just to get people back into work, so that they're a functioning member of society. So the take on the CBT, the anti-CBT movement of, say, Lyndon and James, or the anti-psychiatry movement of R.D. Laing and Thomas Szasz, does have its place, I think, if only to provide a counterbalance, in the same way as the Liberal Democrats have a place in British politics because they provide an alternative view. My own view on CBT is, or on any therapy, is do what helps. So if CBT helps, do it. If DBT, dialectical behaviour therapy, helps, or transactional analysis, or psychodynamic therapy, or neuro-linguistic programming, or gestalt, or anything you can mention, if that helps, do that. If it's going to make you feel better, do that. But don't do cocaine or stuff, because that'll just ruin your life eventually. So I hope this video's helped a little bit today, and see you next time.